Hello everybody, welcome to the channel, and I would like to formally welcome you to the Starfront Remote Observatory, which is still very much under construction but will be done very soon. In fact, you can see the truss structures for our second observatory building behind me, and immediately behind me you can of course see the very first observatory building. This is the observatory project that I'm currently working on building. I am living out here in the middle of nowhere, and I'll be out here for several months to help complete this project. And I'm super excited about this because the hope is to make access to dark skies way more accessible to the average astrophotographer, to hopefully, enable more people to engage in this passion that we all love so much and do it more frequently and take better photos. For those who are uninitiated, a remote observatory is basically a place where you send your telescope, it lives there permanently, and then every night where it's clear, this whole big roof here will slide off and give you a clear view of the night sky, and then you can log in and use your telescope to do astrophotography. This essentially means you get to be underneath the dark sky every single night that it's clear, instead of letting your telescope sit in a closet or shoot from a Bortle 8-9 backyard every single night that it's clear. This gives you the ability to do really good observing under dark skies in a way that's just not easy to do if you're traveling while you're shooting. You know, not everyone can drive 3 hours out to go image every single night, because that's just too much time. So with that being said, let me give you a brief tour of the inside of the observatory building, and I will show you the very first telescope that's in there, which is mine, and I'll show you a bit more information about how exactly we plan to make these dark skies more accessible. All right, so here we are inside of the observatory floor, and this is where many of the telescopes are going to be. Mine is actually running right now in that dark corner. We're just kind of chilling here, waiting for the moon to get a little higher so that we can see it. But this is where all of the observatory activities will be happening, all of the observations, and where all the telescopes are going to be hanging out. So to speak, this is where the magic happens. The thing that is setting this observatory apart from existing remote observatories is the way that we structure our pricing and the way that we structure the observatory floor plan. Obviously, we're not really reinventing the wheel here with the roll-off roof observatory design. You know, this is something that's been done before many times, but the thing that really hasn't been done before is a model which opens it up to most astrophotographers. The existing models open this up to people who frankly just have a ton of money because this is an expensive hobby and they just have a lot of disposable income, which in recent years there has been, a large explosion of astrophotographers using smaller setups, smaller telescopes. They're not the big plane wave telescope guys, and these people account for the majority of astrophotography. And the question is, where is the remote observing option for all of these people? People who maybe don't go camping every single night to go image, maybe they live somewhere with light pollution. Who knows how many telescopes are just out there sitting unused because there is no option to use them. And that is the point of this. The way that this theory ties into the floor plan is that most people are running relatively small telescope setups. These are in general refractors ranging in size from 51 millimeters to maybe 110. Now these are very small systems and they have a very small footprint around where they sit. And the term we use to describe this here is the swing radius of a telescope. And now, most people have telescopes with a small swing radius, so why not build a remote observatory and improve the cost for the customer by leveraging the small swing radius and fitting more telescopes into one building? So that's the idea. More telescopes, one room, and make it so inexpensive that it's accessible to more people than ever before, really. So yeah, that's That's the whole idea. It seems pretty obvious when you think about it, and it's kind of weird that it doesn't really exist already. Feels good to be first on that front. Anyways, let me show you where my telescope is in the corner, and I'll show you a little bit more about what I mean. My little telescope here is a little Red Cat 61 on an AM3 mount, and this may not be the conventional style telescope that you're used to thinking of as being a remote observing telescope. Anyways, here you can see the really great thing about this is that obviously this is like an ultra compact telescope. And so this thing literally can squeeze so far into this corner without impacting anything that you can really fit, honestly, 1 million of these into an observatory. And the great thing is this is like such a super common telescope that tons of people are using. You know, put 2 and 2 together, this is such an obvious win for someone doing astrophotography. So, you know, just imagine your telescope here and you log into it every night under these Bortle 1 skies. That's the whole idea. This will do its thing while you sleep, and then in the morning, this roof will come back over, shut up, and your telescope will park itself. And that is how you'll do your astrophotography. Now that you know kind of the idea behind our observatory, what I want to do is help warm you up to the idea of remote observing. If you've never done it before, you don't know what's needed, and you're just trying to get a general feel of what's required for remote observing, I'm going to walk you through a setup, my setup from the ground up, and we'll tell you what you need, what you don't need, and answer some of the frequent questions that I get about, you know, how do you do certain things to actually be successful at remote observing. Whenever I think about a setup, I prefer to think about it from the ground up. So we'll start from the ground, work our way upwards through every component of the system, build a complete system, and I'll talk about, you know, some little fun details along the way. Every telescope has to sit on something on the ground. Those of you at home may be used to setting your telescope up on a tripod. Tripods just won't do at a remote observatory for most use cases. The main reason is that you may think a tripod is steady in its placement on the ground forever if you just never touch it, but in reality, that tripod's gonna move and your telescope is gonna get knocked out of polar alignment, and you're gonna have a not very fun time doing remote imaging this way. So in order to save ourselves 1 billion hours of technical labor repolar aligning everyone's telescopes, we have to use piers for our remote observatories. Now, piers are a super standard way of mounting your telescope in a permanent fashion, where essentially you have a big tube. It can either be a poured concrete tube, it could be a steel tube. Anything tubular and rigid will work as a pier for the most part, but it's generally concrete and steel. And that is how we'll be doing our piers. We just have these steel piers here. Now, if I told you how expensive most piers are at remote observatories, you would probably want to vomit at the cost. And even if you were to order one of these online, it's pretty gratuitous how much things will be overcharged because they're for astrophotography. And so our goal is to kind of make the entry into remote observing a lot more painless for people. And so we're manufacturing these piers and just including them for you at no cost. So you don't have to pay for this pier. We're paying for your pier and putting it into the observatory. So that is one of our big changes to the whole remote observing process. And here is our pier manufacture site. So this is where we're actually cutting and welding all of the steel piers together. And here you can see we have our medium tier piers, but I'm gonna walk you around because I don't want to keep getting attacked by this spider. All right, so here you can see where we're welding all our piers. Pretty epic. The way we put your mount onto each of these piers here that you can see is we're just machining a plate here that will go on top, and we'll put in the bolt pattern for your mount, and then we'll just bolt in on the sides that plate, so that will permanently affix your mounts to the pier. Most people are using the same mounts anyways, so it's super easy to just, you know, have a common standard bolt pattern and just smack your mount on top of there. It's really not that hard. There's no reason for it to be so expensive. So that is the lowest portion of your setup, is the pier. And that is the bedrock on which your telescope will sit and where you'll do all of your observing. You've got your pier, you've got your pier plate. The next part of your setup for remote observing is going to be your mount. And the mount can take a lot of different shapes and sizes. And by common convention, or what you may call old head mythology, is you need a premium expensive mount for remote observing. You really don't need a super expensive, fancy, premium Gigantor mount for remote observing. In fact, you can use these small little harmonic mounts to do this task just fine. The mount I'm using for my remote telescope here is a little ZWO AM3, and these things are really great little mounts, and it's the one I'm currently using. But there are many different mounts that you could use for a remote observatory. I'll give you some examples of ones we plan on using here. We have a lot of EQ6Rs, AM5s, AM3s, CEM mounts from Ioptron. There's a lot of software bisque mounts, Mach 1 GTO, Mach 2 GTO, 10 micron. You know, there's a fair share of premium mounts, some mid-tier mounts, some smaller harmonic mounts. There's even a Skywatcher Star Adventure DTI that's slated to go in here, and even something like that could be used. So basically any kind of mount will function, but there are some caveats to keep in mind for using a mount in a remote observing context. The only thing that really sets mounts apart from being easier to use versus more difficult to use at some points is whether or not they have what's called a physical home. Now, let me walk you through a sequence of events. Let's say that you are slewing your telescope around, and for some reason or whatever, it's very rare that this would ever happen, but during a clear night, the power is cut, the roof gets shut because of a fail condition, and now your mount is left wondering where it is in space, and it just doesn't know when you turn it back on in the morning when the power is reestablished. So what will you do with your mount to get it back to where you can sync it and start imaging the stars again without, you know, slewing your telescope into the pier? And this is a really important question. So if you have a mount with a physical home, all you do is you go to your control program and you say home mount, and your mount, regardless of where it is, will slew back to a known position with some kind of, you know, magnetic switch inside the mount to where it knows where it is after the power goes out, which is really handy to have. So a lot of mounts have this function. These harmonics can go home. Ioptron mounts can find home. Premium mounts, all of them can find home. The ones that can't find home are really just, you know, EQ5, EQ6, these kinds of mounts. And if you have any doubts, you can always do a search, see if your mount model has a physical home position. You can find out if you have that as an option. There's no need to fear. If your mount doesn't have the ability to go back home, then what you can do is you can use a webcam, which will have webcams installed at the observatory, and you can use it to bring the mount back to the standard park position, which is telescope pointing north and the RA axis is totally upright. And once you do this, you can just click on Polaris in whatever capture program you have or planetarium, and you can sync your mount's position to Polaris, because you know your mount is pointed at Polaris for sure. You can tell the mount where it is based on that information. So that's how you bring a mount home in those rare events. The mount is going to be, in general, the bedrock of your setup. It's going to be what guides you along to get sharp images of the night sky. So it's good to have a mount that you like to get good photos. You know, if you can't get good photos at home, then you can't get good photos out here. So just keep that in mind. It's time to talk telescopes. So for remote observing, you can pretty much use whatever telescope you want, with the caveat that I would say you should get one that doesn't suck. In the interest of keeping this video within its scope, I'm not gonna go through the discussion of which telescopes suck and which don't. I would hope you already have a telescope that you like, you've taken photos from, and it's good. There's a lot of videos out there on the internet already pointing out telescopes which are, you know, consistent and good to use. The one thing I will say, you know, you can use whatever telescope you want as long as you know, can use it to take photos. The only thing that makes a telescope usable for remote observing is really the ability to put an autofocuser on it. And this brings me, of course, to the next section of the setup from the ground up, is the autofocuser. Now, an autofocuser, for those who may not be aware, is basically a small motorized device that you control with a computer that puts a motor that basically cranks your focuser shaft, and it lets you focus on the stars from your computer and not in person. Now, I have to say this, you absolutely need one of these if you want to do remote observing at all, because no one's going to be out here to focus your telescope for you. If you ask me nicely, I might just, but you really need this to be able to focus at a distance, automated throughout the night. And many people are already using one of these, which is great because you need one to be able to image while you sleep, automated. So there's a lot of different models. The ZWO EAF is very consistent, and it's pretty ubiquitous in the way that it adapts to almost all telescopes. So if you don't have one already, it may be convenient to get one of those. If not, there is a whole world of different options out there as far as what you can use. You could get a Moonlight, you could get a Prima Luce focuser, you could get an Optec focuser, you know, pick your poison. I'm not here to tell you which one exactly you should use, just to say you need one that you can control from a computer. For sure, absolutely, you 100% need that. Next, of course, we have the camera. I'm using an ASI 183mm. I may switch it in the future, but the great thing about this camera and what you should think about for your remote observing is getting a camera that's dedicated for astrophotography. DSLRs can be used in a remote context, but I will say it's not as fun. It's a bit more difficult and your images won't be as good. You should use a dedicated astro camera, something that can cool itself down to a colder temperature and allow you to get lower noise images. And I think that is probably what most people are using. There are, you know, a billion different brands to pick from. Of course, you got ZWO, you got QHY, you got Moravian, TubeTech, Player One. All of them have their own, you know, little quirks. They all have their downsides. They all have their upsides. This is kind of like a pick your poison type thing. So use what you have is what I would suggest if you already have a deep sky camera that can cool itself down. If you're shooting mono, I'm assuming you probably already have a filter wheel, but manual filter wheels are a no-no because they require someone to be out here and click your filter wheel for you, which is not ideal. So most people, I'm sure you're aware, if you're using monochrome imagery, you have a filter wheel that's electronic and it lets you pick if you want to shoot red, green, blue, or narrowband filters, and you can select that via a computer. I'm sure for a lot of you, I'm kind of like preaching to the choir. You maybe already know this, but I want to illuminate this information for someone who may, you know, not be in the know about these specific things. So lastly, at the very top of the setup, I have an auto guider, and right now I just have a little ZWO mini guide cam with a ZWO 290mm, and this guide camera I have in here right now is courtesy of Ian Lauer Astro. So big thanks to Ian for giving me his guide camera without consent, because I needed it to shoot tonight. But no worries, Ian, I'll put your guide camera back on your telescope tomorrow morning, so you'll have no idea that it was gone. A guide camera and a guide scope basically follows a star throughout the night, and it lets you get sharper images of space because it will account for any errors in alignment or tracking with your mount, any of those issues it deals with. There's two ways people go about doing it. You either use a little mini guide scope like this, or you use an OAG, which picks off a little bit of light from your imaging system to guide from with a pick-off prism. And both of these work for remote observing. Again, if they work at home for you, they're going to work out here just fine. You should just be aware of the pitfalls of each, like being able to find guide stars on an OAG or differential flexure with a little mini guide scope. But these are all topics that have been covered ad nauseum by other people. It's just, I'm letting you know for a remote context, both of these will work just fine for you. I'm going to work my way now up to the top of the telescope. We'll talk about flat panels, and then I'm going to walk back through all the cabling and the control. All right, so at the top end of my telescope, right now it's obviously pretty naked and bare. So in many different remote observatories, you may be used to seeing what's called a flip flat, which is basically a motorized little lens cap with a built-in flat panel on it that lets you cover up the front of your telescope to take dark frames, to take bias frames, and also to take flat frames. They're super convenient to have and a nice luxury. So, you know, if you have one, I would suggest getting it. If you don't have one and you want to spend the money on one, I'll say it's probably worth it. However, I will also say that it's really not strictly necessary for remote observing that you have one. If you want to do flats, then you can do automated sky flats. That will work very well. And if you want to do your darks and your bias, there's a couple different options for you. One, you could submit a ticket to us to have us put a lens cap on your telescope, and we'll just slap a lens cap on, you know, on a cloudy night or something, and then you can do your calibration frames this way, and then we'll uninstall the lens cap at a later point when you need to. Another option is you just take your dark frames when the roof is closed on a cloudy, moonless night, and it's going to be pretty pitch black in here in those situations. And so as long as you're not pointed directly at an LED light in someone's system, then you can take darks as well through a narrowband filter or otherwise. But there are options, there are workarounds. I don't want to tell you that you need a flat panel for your system, but I will tell you that it's nice to have. So that is basically all of the optical and mechanical components from the ground up for your telescope. For remote observing, again, pretty standard. You could say it's all the same stuff that you would expect to use your telescope normally. You know, nothing has changed here. What will be different is I'm going to walk you now through the computer and power control. All right, so we're chilling now here down at the telescope pier, and I'm just showing you what I've got for my loadout on my pier. There's a couple things that you'll see that I have Velcro taped to my pier that I use to do my astrophotography. So right here, this little black box, this is a Beelink mini PC. And this is the one that we're going to recommend that most people get because they've been the most consistent for us for remote observing. And what this is this little guy is going to replace your capture laptop. It's going to replace your ASI Air for remote observing. It's just going to be the way that you control your telescope is through this PC with a remote control software program like Chrome Remote, AnyDesk, TeamViewer, RustDesk. There's a million different options, but this is how you're going to run your stuff, is through an automation program like Nina or SGP. You're going to download it to your mini PC and you're going to log into this guy from home, and you're going to run all of your astrophotography gear from this. And then once you've got your images, you use Dropbox or Google Drive and you send them home to your computer, and it'll be a big mission success. But this is really one of the other critical components that you're going to need for remote observing is you'll need a nice computer. These ones are pretty cheap. This is only like $350 or $399. So a good option, and we just Velcro tape it right to your pier, and it's a super neat, compact way to run your telescope. If you already have like a Prima Luce Eagle or your own Nuke, just use what you have. If it works, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The only thing that's special you want to do with your little mini PC is set up the BIOS on your computer so that if there's a power disconnection, that it turns back on automatically after you reconnect the power. And again, this is just a nice contingency to have if there's a power outage. This will just bring your computer right back online as soon as the power is back, and it's great for everyone because you don't have to wait on us to turn your computer on, and it's just going to be on. The other thing that you'll want to have, which I don't have here now because it's being shipped, is a web-controlled power switch to remotely cycle power to your devices. So if you want to like turn your computer on and off, or your camera or anything in your setup on and off, you can have a little, power strip where you can actually control the outlets. And I'll link the one in the description that I recommend getting, but it's just, it's pretty necessary when dealing with troubleshooting, as I'm sure you're aware, is turning things on and off often fixes a problem that you might have, and being able to do that remotely with a web controlled power switch is really great. I've also got a Pegasus power box here, a little small one. Now these can be a really nice luxury to have for remote observing because they can help you do power cycling or USB disconnections and reconnections without having to turn your computer on and off. So I'll link them in the description as well. But like I said, not necessary to have, but just a nice luxury. That's really a lot of the things in remote observing are not mission critical, but mission nice to have. So that's basically it. That's how you control it, how you control your outlets, how you control your devices from the ground up. The one other thing I haven't mentioned is the internet here. So the internet is going to be dealt out via Ethernet. So we're just going to tap an Ethernet cable into your computer or whatever you're using. So you'll get nice consistent internet. So that's something you won't have to worry about because it'll all be handled for you. That's pretty much all there is to know about remote observing in a kind of simple sense. It's really not as complicated as you think it is. And if you're able to do it consistently in your backyard automated, then there's no reason, that it doesn't work out here, minus a couple of caveats and luxuries, of course, like having a flip flat, a mini PC to control your system, and a web-controlled power switch to handle power cycling, and maybe a Pegasus power box to handle USB and power cycling as well. There's things that are needed, things that are nice to have, but it's not as bad as you may have thought it would be in terms of what you need and how to get started. And again, on a typical night, how you may expect this all to go is that shortly before sunset, this roof will kick open, and then you can log into your telescope, set up an imaging run, and start using your telescope automated and watch the images roll in. Go to sleep, wake up, roof's gonna be closed, your scope will park itself if you're using an automation program, and then you can download your images and process them at home. So it's a really, really good way to do observing. It really, to be honest, it's the best way to get images and to do more imaging projects that maybe are more difficult, or to go out and explore things, and just to more consistently do astrophotography. I will say there's nothing that really beats the experience of being out under the stars and enjoying them with your own eyes. And that's really, and I'm not saying that this is an answer to that. I would still recommend, whenever you get the chance, to go out and look at the night sky. But this is a better way to do observing for deep sky in general. That's what I will say. I mean, you look at the professional observatories, this is what the large scale observatories do. This is how they consistently do their observations, is they're located in the place that is dark already. I want this to be an option for a lot more astrophotographers than it is currently. And so that's what we're doing out here. We're working on building that option to make this more accessible and easier to do. To give you all a little construction update for the project and when you can expect to send your telescopes out is currently, as you can see, building 1 is pretty much all the way done. We're going to be putting the motor and the chain and automating the roof in the next week. And we're shooting to have this part of it done by the end of May. And you can see the second building is also coming up. We also hope to have that done by the end of May as well. The construction here is moving very quickly because we want to make this happen as soon as possible. So we're going to be collecting telescope shipments very soon. We just got our shipping address for this very, very rural location. So you'll be able to send out your telescopes shortly. One thing that has come up a lot is people asking about installing their own telescopes. And I totally get that because, you know, I'm someone who likes to install my own telescopes as well. But with this particular observatory, there's a number of concerns. Basically, with the density of telescopes we're going to have, it's a huge liability to have people in here installing their own stuff at night. If someone gets injured, you know, that's on us. It's pretty risky. It's going to be risky to be in here in the dark installing stuff, and things happen, and we want to keep everyone safe, and we want to keep everyone's stuff safe. That is going to be our priority at this observatory. And so knowing that people, you know, want to keep their stuff safe, they also maybe don't want to ship out their telescope and let that package be in UPS's hands. And so we're going to accept people to come do a drop-off of their system here in person if they want to drive their telescopes out. We'll give you a walkthrough of the observatory, you know, show you the facility, and then collect your stuff and install your telescope for you because we want to keep your gear safe and everyone else's gear safe. Yeah, just in case you have any doubts, I've installed a lot of different observatory telescopes, a lot of remote observatory telescopes. This isn't my first rodeo, and so you guys are going to be in good hands with your stuff getting installed. And it will be me who's at risk for injury in here, not you. That is the plan. Things are moving fast, and we're going to be up and running very shortly. I'll be posting some more updates along the way and some images as I capture them. I only really just got here, so I hope you all found this helpful, informative, and I hope it gets you excited as I am to kind of change this part of the astronomy world. With that being said, I am gonna go to sleep. Hey everybody, I hope you all enjoyed the video. I'm just here to let you know at the end that if you're interested in hosting a telescope with us under Border One Skies in Central Texas, please check the description for the link to our website, starfront.space. There you can sign up for our email list, or you can make a deposit to reserve a pier at our observatory. It's just a 1-month refundable deposit at any time, so if you want to secure a spot, go ahead and do that. We're taking everyone's system information in advance as well, just to make sure that we can perfectly get the floor plan situated to where no one's telescope has a chance of impacting another, and that everyone is going to have good horizon visibility. So we don't have a ton of spots left. The first building is completely full, and the second building is partially full. So if you're interested, please go to the description and you'll find all the information you need there about securing a spot. So I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you all in the next one.